It was the kind of summer afternoon that seemed too quiet for its own good. The sun hung heavy over the sleepy town of Marrow Bay, a coastal place tucked between jagged cliffs and an endless stretch of sea. In 1986, it was a town with no rush, no crime, and nothing that ever made the evening news. People left their doors open. Kids played in the streets until the streetlights buzzed on. No one imagined it could all shatter in one afternoon. That afternoon, the Connolly sisters, Amy 8 and Marie 10, were last seen playing with chalk on the sidewalk just outside their little yellow house. Their mum, Margaret Connolly, had peeked through the window a few times between folding laundry and fixing sandwiches. She remembered seeing them laughing, drawing suns and hopscotch boxes. The world outside was safe, or so she thought. By 5:12 p.m. they were gone. No screaming, no tire marks, no clues, just a faint trail of chalk dust leading toward the gravel road that curved down to the marina. Margaret called their names for an hour before the panic set in. The police were notified by 6:30. By sunset, every able-bodied person in Marrow Bay was out combing the beach, woods, and marina. Flashlights cut through the trees. Dogs barked into the night. But no one found so much as a shoe. At first, the police believed the girls had wandered into the sea. That was the simple explanation. Tragic, but logical. Maybe a wave had taken them. Maybe they slipped on the rocks near the tide pools. But Amy was terrified of the water. She didn't even like getting her face wet in the bath. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. No bodies, no clothing, nothing. The town grieved, but the case eventually went cold. Their names faded into small talk, cautionary tales told to younger kids. By the time the 90s rolled around, the Connolly girls were just another sad memory, Marrow Bay quietly shoved into its closet. Margaret never left town. She kept the yellow house, the same curtains, the same doorbell that never rang anymore. People whispered about her losing her mind, especially after she started leaving the porch light on every night. For the girls, she said, whenever someone dared ask. 15 years passed. Then came August 4th, 2001. Raymond Beck, a local fisherman known for his drinking and running his mouth, set out early that morning just before dawn. His boat, the driftwood, creaked and groaned as it always did, held together more by faith than screws. He wasn't expecting a good haul, just a few crab pots and whatever the net dragged in. But what it did drag in wasn't fish. It wasn't even whole. About 3 miles off the coast, his net snagged something heavy, too heavy. It took him 20 minutes to wrestle it aboard. He thought it was driftwood or maybe an old trunk. But when it hit the deck, the thud was wrong, soft and solid at the same time. The smell hit next. Inside the torn, seaweed-wrapped net was what looked like a bundle of plastic sheets tied together with thick rope. Raymond stared at it for a moment, heart thudding, before slicing the rope loose with his knife. That's when the bundle spilled open. Bones, small ones, tiny shoes, waterlogged and half-rotted, still strapped to brittle feet. A child's skull, hair tangled in seaweed, jaw partly open, like it had been screaming even in death. Raymond vomited over the side of the boat. He didn't haul in another pot that day. Instead, he turned the boat around and radioed the Coast Guard. By the time he docked, there were already 2 cruisers waiting. Within hours, the town of Marrow Bay was no longer quiet. And when Margaret Connolly got the call that afternoon, she didn't cry. She just whispered, "I told them they'd come home. I told them." But only one set of remains had been found, the younger sister, Amy. Marie was still out there, somewhere. The entire town seemed to hold its breath the day after Amy's remains were discovered. News vans rolled into Marrow Bay like vultures, circling something freshly dead. For the first time in 15 years, the girls' names weren't just faded memories, they were headlines. Reporters stood near the marina, filming with serious expressions, trying to squeeze drama from every gust of sea wind. Margaret Connolly didn't speak to the media. She hadn't spoken much to anyone in over a decade, but that morning, she did walk to the police station, the same one she had stood in 15 years ago with her hands shaking and throat dry from screaming her daughter's names. Now she walked calmly, like her soul had already accepted something the rest of the world was just beginning to understand. Detective Lance Holloway had been a rookie when the girls disappeared. Back then, he was the one knocking on doors, interviewing neighbors, turning over rocks and hoping for miracles. Now he was graying, divorced, and looked perpetually tired. When Margaret walked in, he stood up, startled by her presence. "You knew, didn't you?" she said, sitting down across from him without being invited. "You always thought they were dead." He hesitated. "I thought it was likely, yes. We all did, but we didn't have proof." She nodded slowly, her eyes locking onto his. "For you have proof now." Holloway swallowed hard. "We do. We confirmed through dental records the remains belong to Amy, but we didn't find Marie." "I know," Margaret said softly, "because they didn't die together." Holloway leaned in. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers tapped against the chair. Then she whispered, "Amy wouldn't have left Marie. Marie wouldn't have left Amy. That means someone separated them. That means someone wanted them apart." The words hung in the air like fog off the water. Holloway didn't know what to say. All the case files he'd buried, all the interviews, the suspects, the theories, it had all gone cold years ago. But now one girl was found and the other wasn't, and suddenly nothing felt like an accident anymore. Meanwhile, Raymond Beck sat on the edge of his boat, chain-smoking like the Marlboros were the only thing keeping his nerves from disintegrating. He hadn't told the police everything. He hadn't told them about the other thing that came up, in the net. What he kicked back into the water before they arrived. A Polaroid. Old, water-warped, but still visible. 2 little girls in bathing suits. One smiling, one not. Behind them the shadow of a man, half in the frame, tall, with a cigarette dangling from his hand. Raymond had stared at it for too long. He knew that man. Or at least he had an idea. He remembered a boat that used to be docked not far from his own. A green trawler called the Minnow's Cry. The owner? A loner named Ellis Roach. Quiet type. Always wore gloves, even in summer. Vanished the year after the girls did. Raymond didn't say a word. He just dropped the photo into the sea and watched it sink like a secret he didn't want in his life. But secrets have a way of resurfacing. That night, someone knocked on Margaret Connolly's door. She opened it slowly. There was no one there. Just a box on her porch. Inside it was another Polaroid. Marie, just Marie, eyes wide, terrified, and a date on the back. July 19th, 1986, the day after they vanished. Margaret stared at the photo for so long her hands began to shake. The old image, faded and torn at the corners, felt heavier than any memory. Marie was unmistakable, her wide blue eyes, freckles dusting, her nose and that same red t-shirt she'd been wearing the day she vanished. But the way she looked in the photo, afraid, hunched, as if caught mid-sob, was something Margaret had never seen on her daughter's face before. She turned the photo over again. July 19th, 1986. Someone had written it in black ink, shaky and uneven, like they were nervous. Her stomach turned. The date confirmed one terrifying truth. Marie had still been alive after Amy was gone. Margaret didn't call the police immediately. She just sat at the kitchen table with the photo, the box beside her, and a million thoughts ricocheting inside her skull. Who had taken it? Why now? Why send it to her? Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the old house. The porch light flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Margaret rose from her chair, trembling slightly, and walked to the drawer near the sink. She opened it slowly and pulled out a small revolver. Her late husband's. She hadn't touched it in years, but suddenly it felt necessary, like something primal had awakened. Meanwhile, across town, Detective Holloway sat alone in his office, reading through the old files. Something about the timing didn't sit right with him. If Amy had died on the day of the disappearance, and Marie survived longer, the investigation had failed more than anyone realized. He picked up the phone and called one of the old officers who had worked the case back then, retired Sergeant Tom Weller. The line rang 5 times before a tired voice answered. "Weller. It's Holloway. Got a minute?" "Yeah, what's up?" "We found Amy's body. Raymond Beck pulled her from the sea yesterday." There was silence on the other. End, then a long breath. Damn, after all this time. Yeah, but that's not the part bothering me. We only found Amy. Marie's still missing. And today, something showed up at Margaret's place, a photo. Looks like Marie, alive, the day after they vanished. Another pause. Then Weller spoke, quieter now. Lance, I probably should have told someone this a long time ago. There was a man back then. Came up a few times in tips, but we never had anything solid. Lived near the cliffs. Bit of a drifter. Went by Roach, Ellis Roach. Yeah, Beck mentioned that name. What do you? No. He was always around the marina, asking too many questions. Gave me the creeps. He disappeared 6 months after the girls did. Took off in his boat. We figured he left town, maybe died out at sea. Didn't seem worth chasing. We didn't have squat on him. Holloway closed his eyes. We might now. The next morning, a team was dispatched to the cliffs where Roach had once lived. His old shack, long abandoned, still stood like a broken rib cage over the rocks. Inside, the air was thick with salt and rot. They found a mattress, old beer cans, and what looked like a rusted freezer, bolted shut and chained. They pried it open. Inside was water-damaged plastic, rotting ropes, and something wrapped in an old tarp. Not a body, just a doll. One that matched the description of Amy's favorite, something Margaret had mentioned in her first statement years ago. The doll had been missing ever since. There was something else, too. A small wooden box tucked under the floorboards. Inside, more Polaroids. All of Marie. In some she looked terrified, in others older. A few had dates stretching all the way into 1989. 3 years after the girls vanished. Back at the station, Holloway dropped the photos onto the desk in front of Margaret. Her eyes scanned them with trembling hands. She didn't cry, she just kept whispering, she was alive, all that time she was alive. And then she pointed to one of the last photos. There, that man. I've seen him before. Holloway leaned in, a man's shadow again, just like the photo Raymond didn't mention. This time it wasn't just a silhouette. There was a full face, and Holloway recognized him too, because he still lived in Marrow Bay. Holloway stared at the photograph like it might blink. The man in the background, sharp jaw, deep-set eyes, cigarette tucked between 2 fingers, wasn't just familiar. He was unforgettable. Sheriff Kenneth Marlowe, retired now, widely respected. The same man who had overseen the original investigation into the Connolly sisters' disappearance. Holloway's mouth went dry. The idea slithered in slowly, like oil leaking under a locked door. Could the very man who had led the search known something? Could he have been there? He didn't say a word to Margaret, not yet. She was already, trembling, holding the photo with both hands like it might vanish if she let go. He reached over and gently slid the picture back into the file. I need to check something, he said. Margaret didn't ask what. She just nodded, the shock in her eyes replacing any desire for answers she might have had left in her. Holloway left the station, his thoughts unraveling in every direction. If Marlowe had been involved, why hadn't anyone seen it? Why hadn't he seen it? They had all looked up to the man. Hell, Marlowe had practically raised him in the force, trained him, trusted him. And yet, in the photo, there he was, standing just feet behind a terrified little girl in what looked like a dingy basement. It was dated 1989. Marlowe had still been sheriff then, still shaking hands at community parades, still telling reporters. The girls were probably lost to the sea. That evening, Holloway drove to Marlowe's house, a brick colonial sitting peacefully on a bluff overlooking the marina. Nothing about it screamed darkness. The lawn was trimmed. The porch had a rocking chair. A cat lounged lazily by the screen door. Evil rarely looked like a monster, he reminded himself. It looked like a neighbor, a mentor, sometimes even a friend. Marlowe answered the door wearing a cardigan and a forced smile. Lance, he said, you're a long way from the station. Everything all right? I need to ask you about Ellis Roach, Holloway said, skipping any pretense. You remember him? Marlowe's brow twitched ever so slightly. Course, the drifter. Bit of a weirdo, but harmless, far as I recall. Why? He's come up again. Something connected to the Connolly girls. Marlowe's face fell into a look of heavy sympathy. God, those poor kids. After all this time? Holloway watched him closely. We found Amy in the sea. Raymond Beck dragged her in on his boat. Marlowe didn't flinch. Christ. And Marie? She's still missing, but new evidence says she didn't die. Found CT6. She was alive, maybe even into the early 90s. That did it. A flicker in Marlowe's eyes. Too quick for most people to notice, but Holloway saw it. The old man was nervous. Can I come in? Holloway asked. Marlowe hesitated for a moment. Now's not really... I wasn't asking. Inside, the house smelled like pine cleaner and old paper. Holloway's eyes swept over the walls, pictures of Marlowe in uniform, shaking hands with mayors, smiling with young deputies. But something gnawed at him. This wasn't just about Roach anymore. They sat in the living room. Holloway pulled out the photo, just one of them, the one with Marlowe's face in the frame. He laid it on the coffee table between them. Marlowe stared at it, unmoving. I want to believe there's an explanation, Holloway said quietly, but that's you, standing behind Marie. Marlowe reached for the photo, hands trembling slightly. Lance, this isn't what you think, and then tell me what it is. Tell me why this picture exists. Tell me why Marie looks like she's being held prisoner. Silence. The clock ticked on the mantel. Then Marlowe's voice dropped. I tried to stop him, he said. Holloway's blood went cold. Stop who? Marlowe's eyes filled with something between guilt and dread. Roach. He wasn't working alone. You were working with him? No, Marlowe snapped. Not at first. He blackmailed. The photos from Vietnam, things I did, things I'd let happen. He found out, said if I didn't help him, he'd destroy my life. Holloway's head spun. So what did you do? Marlowe looked away, voice breaking. I gave him information, patrol routes. When the search parties were going out, when they'd be farthest from the cliffs. He said he just wanted to scare the girls. Keep them hidden for a few days. But after Amy, he stopped himself. Holloway leaned forward, voice low. What about Amy? Marlowe closed his eyes. He called me one night, said the younger one was dead, said it was an accident, drowned. But I think he did something worse. The room went still. Marlowe opened his eyes again. Marie was alive for years. I know that. He kept her in that damn shack, moved her inland when things got hot. But one day, he just disappeared. I thought maybe he'd killed her too. Or maybe he got tired of hiding. Holloway's heart thudded. And now someone's sending photos. Which means, Marlowe whispered, she might still be alive. The wind howled through Marrow Bay that night like it was trying to warn them. Holloway sat in his car just outside Marlowe's house, replaying every word the old man had said. He believed him, at least most of it. The way Marlowe's voice cracked when he said Amy's name, the twitch in his jaw when Marie came up. It didn't feel like a performance. But that didn't mean he was innocent. He drove back to the station in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When he got in, he went straight for the evidence locker, digging through the dusty Connolly file that had been untouched for years. He laid out everything, reports, interviews, old maps, and one by one, pieced the puzzle together. Ellis Roach had lived off the grid near the cliffs for just 6 months before vanishing, but there were rumors he had owned a second property inland, something under a different name. A hunting cabin, perhaps, somewhere Marie could have been taken. Holloway called in a favor from a friend at the county records office. Within an hour he had something, a plot of land purchased in 1985 under the name Edward R. Ellis. The initials were flipped, hidden in plain sight. The land was just 25 miles inland, surrounded by forest. He grabbed his keys. Before he left, he stopped by Margaret's house. She opened the door looking like she hadn't slept in days. He didn't waste time. I think I know where she might be, he said. Margaret didn't ask who he meant. She just stepped back and grabbed her coat. They drove together, headlights slicing through fog, neither saying a word. The road narrowed to gravel, then dirt, and finally they came upon a rusted gate half swallowed by vines. A wooden sign barely hung from one post, the letters faded by rain and time. "Here," Holloway said. They walked in slowly, trees pressed, in on both sides like they wanted to hide whatever secrets lay ahead. After a quarter-mile, the cabin appeared, small, sagging, and silent. He motioned for Margaret to stay back. She refused. The front door was locked, so Holloway kicked it, open with one hard boot. The smell hit immediately, mold, dust, and something else, old sweat maybe, something that had lived here, or still did. The inside was dark, lit only by beams of moonlight slicing through cracks in the boards. Cobwebs danced in every corner. Furniture was overturned. There was a mattress on the floor, moldy and stained, chains bolted to the wall. Margaret let out a sharp gasp and covered her mouth. In the corner, a desk. Holloway opened the drawers. Inside, notebooks, dozens of them, handwritten pages filled with messy scrawl. He flipped one open. She cried again today, asked for her mother, said her sister told her not to be scared. Amy is dead. She needs to forget Amy. She needs to forget everything. Another entry. The sheriff is getting nervous, keeps telling me to stop taking pictures, but he likes them. I see how he looks at them. He's no better than me. Margaret couldn't take it anymore. She stepped out of the cabin, retching in the grass. Holloway kept reading. One final entry, scribbled like it was written in panic. She's not eating, not sleeping. Keeps saying, "They'll come. She's wrong, no one is coming, no one remembers anymore." But someone had remembered and someone had sent those photos. Suddenly, from outside, Margaret screamed. Holloway bolted through the door. She was pointing toward the tree line, her face pale. "Someone was watching us," she gasped. "Standing right there, he ran when I screamed." Holloway raised his gun and scanned the trees, but whoever it was had vanished into the night. They searched the area, found no tracks, no signs. But near the tree line, tucked into a hollow stump, was another box. Inside, one single Polaroid. Marie again. Older, maybe 17 or 18, still alive. And beneath it, a cassette tape, labeled "Play Me." Back at the station, the tape recorder clicked into place with a harsh mechanical sound, and for a moment the room was filled with nothing but the low hum of static. Holloway and Margaret sat side by side, eyes fixed on the old device like it might explode. The tape was old, brittle-sounding. Something about it felt alive, like the words inside had been waiting to crawl out for years. Then a voice crackled through the static. At first it was faint, a shuffle, breathing, and then her. "Is it recording?" the girl whispered. Margaret's breath hitched. That voice, older, wearier, but unmistakably Marie's. "I don't know who's going to hear this, maybe no one. Maybe you already gave up, maybe you forgot me, but I'm still here, I've been here for years." She sounded tired, broken in places, but strong in others. The kind of strength born from suffering, not resilience. "He keeps me in a room underground, says it's for my safety, says the world outside is worse. He tells me Amy's gone. He says she ran into the ocean, but I don't believe him. I hear her sometimes in my dreams. I think she's trying to find me." Margaret began to cry softly, her hands covering her mouth. Marie continued. "There was another man, too, older. He used to come by with food and sit at the top of the stairs. He smelled like tobacco and oil. He never talked to me, just watched. Then one day he stopped coming. The other man, Roach, he got meaner after that." A pause, then a sharp breath, like she was choking something back. "I think I'm dying. My teeth hurt, I'm cold all the time. He says if I behave I can go outside, but I don't believe him anymore. I think he's going to bury me in the woods and tell people I never existed. So I made this tape. If you're listening to it, please, don't forget me, please don't let him win." There was a long stretch of silence. Then, just before the tape clicked off, her voice returned, soft, like she was right next to them. "Mom, if you hear this, I love you. I never stopped. I never will." The tape clicked. Margaret crumpled forward, sobbing so hard her body shook. Holloway just sat there, staring at the recorder, heart pounding like a drum in his ears. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. "She's alive," Margaret whispered. "Or at least she was." He nodded slowly. "And someone wants us to find her now. That's why they left the tape. That's why they're sending the photos." "But who?" she asked. "Roach? I doubt it. If he still had her, he wouldn't be trying to expose himself. This feels like guilt. Like someone who knows something but doesn't want to carry it anymore." He thought for a long moment, then his eyes widened. Raymond Beck, the fisherman. He had been quiet since the day he pulled Amy's remains from the sea. Too quiet. And he'd been around in 1986, knew the docks, knew Roach, claimed he just found Amy's body. But he'd never mentioned the photo, the one he tossed back into the ocean. Holloway knew now. It hadn't been the only thing Beck had found. He stood quickly. "I need to talk to him. Now." Margaret stood too, her voice suddenly strong. "I'm coming with you." They drove to Beck's house. Just after 9 p.m. It sat on the edge of the harbour, a rotted two-story shack that leaned like it was drunk. The porch light was off. No sound inside. Holloway knocked once, twice. No answer. He tried the handle. Unlocked. The door creaked open. The house was dark, filled with the heavy scent of dead fish, cigarettes and mould. Margaret hesitated on the threshold, but Holloway pressed in. The floor groaned beneath his feet. "Raymond," he called. Nothing. They stepped into the kitchen, dishes piled up, an ashtray overflowing, beer cans everywhere. Then they saw the note. Taped to the fridge. One word written in shaky black marker. "Sorry." Holloway yanked open the basement door. At the bottom of the stairs, swinging slowly from a pipe, was Raymond Beck. His body was limp, face swollen, chair tipped over beneath him, and clutched in one hand. A photograph. Marie. Alive. Standing in front of a rundown motel. In the background, a highway sign, barely readable, but enough. They had a location. The motel sat just off Route 17, an hour north of Marrow Bay, surrounded by rusting gas pumps, broken vending machines, and a sagging neon sign that flickered the word vacancy like a warning instead of an invitation. It was the kind of place people passed by without a second glance, quiet, forgotten, and perfect for hiding. Holloway and Margaret drove in silence. The photograph Raymond Beck had clutched gave them a partial view of the sign out front. Silver Pine Motel, exit 142. It was faint, but it was enough. The highway was mostly empty that late at night, just the occasional semi-truck barreling. By. As the lights of the Silver Pine came into view, Margaret leaned forward in her seat, her eyes locked onto the rows of dimly lit rooms. "Do you think she's here?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "She was," Holloway replied, "or someone wanted us to believe that." They parked near the office. The place looked dead. No clerk behind the counter. The lobby light was on, casting yellow across the parking lot. A buzzer hung by the door with a faded sign, "Ring bell for service." Holloway didn't bother. Instead, he walked toward the far end of the motel, where the photo had shown Marie standing beside room 12. The number hung loosely on the door, barely attached. He knocked. Then again, louder. No answer. He drew his weapon. "Marie?" he called. "My name is Lance Holloway. I'm here to help you. Your mother's with me." Margaret stepped forward. "Marie, baby. It's me. Please, if you're in there." They waited. Nothing. Then a sound, a creak, movement inside. Holloway stepped back, ready to breach if he had to. The door unlocked with a quiet click, and slowly it opened. A woman stood in the doorway, thin, pale, hollow cheeks, eyes too big for her face. Her hair was matted, her arms bruised. But there was no mistaking her. "Marie," Margaret whispered, tears rushing to her eyes. The woman blinked, her mouth opened slightly. "Mom." Then she collapsed. They caught her before she hit the ground. Inside the room, the air was heavy with mildew and fear. The windows were blacked out with blankets, a mattress on the floor, cans of soup, bottles of water. A stack of notebooks in the corner, dozens, just like the ones from the cabin. Marie, came to slowly, trembling in Holloway's jacket. Margaret held her daughter for the first time in 15 years, sobbing into her shoulder, rocking her like a baby. "They told me you were dead," Marie whispered. "They told me no one would ever come." "Who?" Holloway asked softly, crouching next to her. She looked at him, her eyes filling with something between pain and rage. "Roach. And another man. I didn't know his name, but I remember his voice." She described him. Old. Deep voice. Limp on the left side, smoked constantly. It wasn't Marlowe, it was someone else. Holloway frowned. "Could it have been Beck?" Marie's face twitched. "He came to see me once, years after Roach left. Said he'd help me escape. But then he changed. Said he couldn't do it, that they'd kill him. He brought food sometimes, left tapes for me to record. Said, maybe someone would listen someday." That lined up with everything. Beck had been a coward, but a coward with guilt. He had let her live, but never freed her. Never called the cops. Just watched. "Do you remember anything else?" "Where Roach might have gone?" Holloway asked. Marie hesitated. "He had a friend, I never saw him. But I heard him on the phone once. Said he'd take over if things got messy. Said he had a place down south. Said..." She paused, frowning. "Said he cleaned up loose ends in Alabama before." Holloway made a note. "We'll find him, I promise." Suddenly Marie grabbed his arm. "No, you don't understand. He said if I ever escaped, he'd kill my mother." They froze. Outside, a car screeched to a halt. Headlights blazed through the motel window. Then the sound of footsteps, fast, heavy. Someone was coming. Holloway drew his gun. "Stay behind me." Margaret pulled Marie close, shielding her. The doorknob turned. The doorknob rattled once. Then again, harder. Holloway raised his weapon, voice firm but steady. "Marrow Bay Police. Step back from the door." Silence. Then a single word, muffled through the crack. "She's mine." Marie let out a strangled gasp. "That's him," she whispered, her voice shaking. "That's the man Roach talked to on the phone. That's the other one." The doorknob stopped moving. For a moment there was nothing but the sound of breathing. Margaret's shallow and panicked, Marie's ragged, Holloway's tight and focused. Then a sharp bang. A gunshot through the thin motel door. Holloway ducked and pushed both women behind the bed. Plaster flew into the air as a bullet struck the dresser behind him. "Stay down!" he barked. He crept along the edge of the bed, peering through the shattered window. A dark figure, heavy-set, moved toward the corner of the building, gun drawn, limping slightly on the left leg. Marie was right. The man wasn't Roach, but he was real, and he was here to silence what was left of the story. Holloway slipped out the side window, landing hard in the dirt. He moved fast, circling the building, gun drawn. The man didn't see him coming until it was too late. "Drop it!" Holloway shouted. The man turned slowly. He had cold eyes, dead eyes, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Where is Roach?" Holloway demanded. "He's dead," the man said. "Cancer, Karma's got teeth, but I'm still here. I kept her alive, I kept control." "You abused a child, you stole her life." "I gave her structure," he said, sneering. "She's broken now. You can't undo that. You can't fix her." "You're right," Holloway said. "But I can end you." The man didn't drop the gun. He raised it. A single shot cracked the air, and the man dropped, blood blooming from his chest as he hit the gravel like a stone. Holloway stood over him, breathing hard. The man gasped, wheezed, tried to speak, but all that came out was a gurgle. Justice, ugly and late, had finally arrived. Inside the motel room, Margaret held Marie close, both of them sobbing as the echo of the shot faded into the night. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Holloway stayed close as Marie was examined, her pulse weak but stable. She'd need time, doctors, therapy, safety, but she had what she never thought possible: a second chance. 2 days later, back in Marrow Bay, news of Marie Connolly's survival swept through the town like a wildfire. People who had forgotten her face now clutched the latest paper, staring at the photograph of a pale young woman with sunken eyes, but alive. Survivors don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like ghosts who clawed their way back into the light. A memorial was held for Amy, Her body was finally laid to rest properly, the sea no longer her coffin. Margaret stood with Marie, arms entwined, as the town mourned what was lost and what could never be restored. Detective Holloway submitted his final report with a trembling hand. The case was closed, but in his desk drawer he kept one last photograph, the very first one they found. Two sisters, smiling, frozen in the last moment of innocence. He kept it not as a reminder of tragedy, but of what happens when justice sleeps too long. Sometimes the ocean keeps secrets, but eventually it gives them back.